If you just came from my last video, it's time to wipe away those tears and buckle up, get down to some of the nitty-gritty details. If you don't know what I'm talking about, last week I posted an emotional short film I made for a local running group and marathon that supports the future research and treatment for childhood cancer. And it kind of gave a perspective onto why someone would run the marathon. I ran the half, I copped out, didn't run the full thing. And maybe this could give you some inspiration to do the same, join the fight. If you haven't seen the film, go ahead and watch it now. Not because it would just make me so happy, but because it would also, I think, give some context of what we're about to break down, pull apart, show what's wrong, show what's good. If there is any good, there's some good. But yeah, go ahead and watch it if you want to, I guess. Today, I'm not focused on trying to make you cry or myself cry. Instead, I wanted to break down the story a bit and give some insight into some of the decisions that get made when trying to create a story, trying to shoot a story, trying to make a short film, and just give you a little bit behind the scenes look of what that takes. Not because I think this is the greatest story or the greatest short film, but I want to show you that you can do this and you can launch your short film making career. This won't necessarily be a gear or cinematography review. I'll be making one of those in the near future, hopefully next week, but there is some overlap into what a director sees and what a DP sees, so hopefully you'll see more of that next week. Where does it all start? Well, for me, it starts through inspiration, and not the inspiration to, be a better me, get up early in the morning, all that kind of stuff. I try to do that. But inspiration that makes me want to create more, makes me want to create something like the thing that I'm consuming at that time. And the thing that got me was the film Arrival. I wanted to make something pretty similar to that. Ended up in the storyboard that there were some scenes that were very similar. Me and Denis Villeneuve just have the same eye for stuff.
What can I say?
But yeah, I just wanted to tell a human story that kind of had a twist at the end that made you want to watch it again. I think that's a sign of a good thing if you want to watch it again. The whole concept is based off the idea of running in someone else's shoes, which I think is kind of a clever twist on the saying, put yourself in someone else's shoes, or the Ben Rector song, walk a mile in another man's shoes.
Walk a mile in another man's shoes.
And what I wanted was for the audience to walk alongside our main character and feel the pain of what it could be like to lose a child to cancer. So what this film does is has the main character go through that loss, or at least make the audience believe that he is going through that loss, only to show at the end that his daughter is not his daughter, and all he's doing is putting himself in his friend's shoes and into what he is going through. It's an empathetic response. So essentially, the dream sequence or flashback sequence is really the main character putting themselves in the real dad's shoes. And that's why our main character runs, which we show at the beginning of the film. It's kind of a non-linear film with the end at the beginning. So the dialogue between our main character and the real dad is what starts the story. It's the first thing that happens in the linear progression for our main character. And the beginning of the film is a few days after that interaction. In the middle of the film is our main character imagining that that daughter is his own. I might not have done the best job in telling that story, so I apologize if it confused you. Hopefully that clears the air a little bit, but that is the main concept for this film. If you haven't seen some of my other breakdowns, I really love to get everything nailed down in pre-production. It just gets everyone on the same page. They know that I'm not some lunatic. They know what they're signing up for, and they know that I'm not trying to cast their newborn baby or 4-year-old for some wacko film. I had this idea for this film for at least 2 years now. So I had gone through multiple iterations of storyboards of what I wanted to feel like, what I wanted the story to be. The core pretty much remained the same, but there were some things that changed, such as like music and some of the still frames that I was pulling from. Some of them remained the same. And I usually have a good idea for the types of shots that I want. But when I don't, sometimes I just go on Shot Deck or Film Supply to try and get inspiration. And the key for me when I'm looking at those things is I'm trying to find what evokes the emotion that I'm trying to go for that particular scene. What evokes thoughtfulness, what gives off the emotion or of happiness or the energy that I'm wanting, or what creates a feeling of sadness. These are all the kind of questions or thoughts that are going through my brain when I'm looking at a still or a video. It's not necessarily like the movement, or sometimes it is. Sometimes I'll see like a push in and be like, okay, that gives the emotion of what I'm trying to go for in this scene. That's why I might do it that way. But often I'm just trying to see, what does the framing look like? What is the cinematographer and director trying to say in this particular frame? And how can I take that and use it in my own way for this story that I'm trying to tell? My storyboards might not look like everybody else's because I really like my content to be driven by the particular track that is underneath everything. In my world, it's harder to find music that fits a story that I already have. Instead, what I like to do is to find a track that is already trying to tell a story, and I just try to listen to that and fit in some of my experiences or some of the things that I'm trying to tell into that story that's already being told by the composer. When I hear a certain song, sometimes I could just hear the story that they're trying to tell, and the story just kind of unfolds from there. I'm just kind of being a steward of that track. That might be pigeonholing myself, and maybe I'm pretty weird for that. I probably am. So you could tell me in the comments that I'm weird. It's all good. I understand. But from that storyboard comes everything. Comes the dialogue, comes the locations, the crew, all of that. It really starts in the storyboard. At least for me, I had to get that nailed down. And I can do a whole video on just storyboards, and I probably should, on how to create them and inspiration, all that, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, pre-production, it's key. All right, here's the crew. I got the best in the biz. Not only are they true professionals, but they also happen to be my best friends. I love these guys to death. We got Trent Erman, who I believe is going to be the next big producer in the film world. I think he's super talented. He has a great eye for documentaries and storytelling in general. He helped me a bunch with directing this as well. Every time I had a question, he was right there. He gave me great advice. I didn't always take it. No, I took it a lot. Just a great guy, great friend, great person. We got Tyler Bird, who's professional human audio wizard. He's a newbie, kind of green on set, but he doesn't let that show as much. But he's always in a good mood. He's always ready to do something for you, just ready to help. He's a stand-up guy who also let us use his baby to film, so I owe him a lot for that. Yeah. And then we got Jordan Finney. He's our Tacoma driver and our coffee connoisseur. He's usually so much more than that, and of course he is so much more than that, even though what he was doing, but he had limited availability for this film, and he's a killer DP, killer photographer, but he's an even better friend, and he might even be a better Jordan. And then we have Austin Sagne, who was our PA and film buff. This man is an up-and-comer. I learned a lot from him just in chats that we had. We had one this morning. You always need people who are willing to help production, but also help you better yourself in the craft that you're in. He is one of those guys. Just love doing life with that guy. Past that, there were a ton of people that offered up their homes, workplaces, time, all of it. It was really incredible to see so many people come behind this story and support it and wanting to tell this particular story. Always ask for help, because you never know how many people are going to be willing to help you. And that was certainly the case for this film. I could not have done it without any of these people's helps. With all of their help, it was so much. It was overwhelming. It was great, and that's what made it be what it is right now. For casting, Brennan was recommended to me, and he ended up being a huge blessing. He was already running the St. Jude Marathon, which is what this short film was based off of, as well as part of the running club that this film was for too. He also got his brother Bubba to be the dad, and Bubba's daughter, Taylor Faye, to be the older daughter in this film. So big shout out to Brennan, up and comer. He did a fantastic job. He got into the character. He told me what he thinks that he would do if he was the dad in that situation. I love that coming from our actors, just to be able to tell what they think, getting really into that character. That just helps the director so much, just try to figure out what they want. My good friend Paul Kilpatrick was our doctor. He's already a nurse, so he kind of has some of that know-how, not that they're the same thing, but he asked some real doctors and nurses at St. Jude at the hospital what they would say if they were walking a parent through the interaction that we show through this film. So I think that was great. It's just great dedication to the role, man. I just appreciate that. Could not have done it without him. Let's talk about budget. This is kind of a loaded question because, owned a lot of the gear that we used: camera, lenses, lighting, support, all those things that go into it, which in total is probably around $20,000. But it's not just for this production. We use it for, corporate gigs and stuff that we get paid for on the regular. All I had to do was pay for actors' time.
There's the star talent. The lead role.
You could tell our funds were limited.
And since this was a production for, a cause that a lot of people believed in, all of the money that I paid these actors, they wanted it to go straight back to St. Jude, which I thought was so cool. So in total, it was really about $600 that I paid for these actors' time. And, that's just money that came out of my pocket, but I wanted it to, invest into this short film because I really believed in this. I believed in the story, but also believed in, telling some future stories that are pretty similar to this. And the only way that you're going to get hired for those kind of gigs is by investing in yourself now and what you do believe in doing those things so that in the future, hopefully those things will pay off. They don't always, but it's just kind of what I tell myself when I'm lying asleep at night with no money. Investing in myself has been great. All right, production. Again, I'll do a cinematography breakdown of this film later, as I was the DP as well. But really, the whole concept was for this film to feel real and organic. And for people who are not full-time actors, big lighting setups can be a distraction, which is really not what you want. You want these actors just to feel comfortable in kind of everyday scenarios. So a simple tube light or simple setup is sometimes all you really need to do for those types of actors. Because of how small our crew was, we really tried to keep setups minimal and lean and really just accent what is already there in our scene and, emulate it. Windows, the sun, street lights. Use those sources as motivation for our artificial lighting, which is super useful with a camera like the Sony FX3, which is super good in low light, of course. But an instance where we didn't need a huge setup was this window shot where we framed him in between two windows and the sky was actually quite soft. Then moving him closer to the window gave us a bit of a lift, and all we had to do was light him on the key side just a little bit with a soft tube light to give some separation. And I think that ended up being super nice, and it was super minimal, and I think it looked great. Again, I'll go a bit more in depth with gear, cinematography, all of that in a later video. For the actual shots that I wanted to get, it all started and ended with the storyboard. Again, another reason why pre-production is so important, at least in my workflow. Yes, there were times where I asked Trent about what he thought about a certain scene or what an actor might be doing, and we might have changed a few things in that, but really it was a tight ship as far as kind of shots that we got and the kind of shots that were on the storyboard. There were not really many shots that went unused, and that was because of how intentional I was with the storyboard. And I think that really helps with the talent that you're working with. Showing up on set and having a solid idea of what you need will always go far with people. Don't waste their time and they'll go home happy. But at the same time, make sure you're getting enough coverage. There's nothing worse than being in the edit and needing a few extra seconds of someone looking this way or that, when it could have just taken a few extra takes while you're actually on set. So for post-production, pretty much after every shoot that we did, I would come home, ignore my wife, ignore my cat for a little bit, throw in the shots in the spots that they fit in the edit. And because if I didn't do that, I literally would not sleep that night, even though I pretty much don't sleep anyway. But our last shoot was on a Wednesday, and we ended up releasing the film that Friday morning because the marathon was supposed to be the next day, that Saturday, which means I really only had one day to edit the whole thing together. This film took years off my life, but this is where I think the storyboard, again, really shines because I had already told the film in my head through pre-production. Production was just the capture and emulating of what I want, and post is really just cutting all of that up. Of course, things change on set and things change in post, which we'll get into, but I couldn't have done it without the storyboard. The edit was so much easier because of what I already knew it was supposed to look like and feel like. I did all the editing in DaVinci Resolve, as always, and graded in Dehancer, which again, I'll go a bit more in depth on the next video. I'm promising so many things for this next video, but I really enjoy all the editing, coloring, sound design. I'm getting better at that part of it, but I still kind of suck at sound design. And of course, Trent and Tyler, they helped me so much with the edit, making sure it felt right, making sure that it made sense. Because when you're on set and when you're so ingrained in the story, you know what's coming next. It's really hard to kind of separate yourself from that. to kind of put yourself in someone's shoes that's watching this for the first time, you really need multiple eyes on this when it's ready. You don't need eyes on it when you have the first rough cut. You need to go through it yourself a little bit, but also have some people alongside you to kind of help guide you and help your baby, grow into the adult that it needs to be. One thing that I'm learning, going from commercial world to the narrative world, is that the commercial is usually super fast with their cuts. It's literally a way to get you mesmerized and watching, what they're selling, because these fast cuts just cause your eyes just to keep refocusing, and your brain is telling you, you need to watch this, you need to see what's happening on the screen. If you do that in narrative, you're going to tire out your audience really quick. You need to keep their attention span for much longer than just 15, 30 seconds. And not that this was a narrative film, to a T, but there are dialogue scenes that needed to be further drawn out, that further than I could have ever imagined coming from the commercial world. There was dialogue at the end that I had to cut because it just didn't fit into the track that I was using. Again, another reason why I pigeonholed myself into a track. Not great. But fortunately, we got enough coverage that day that I can kind of cover it in post. Again, get your coverage when you're on set. Know what you need, but also get some coverage on the side of that. One tricky part was trying to sell the dream/flashback sequence. And that took up the bulk of the time on that edit day, because it was something that was in the storyboard that I didn't really plan out too well as far as like the flashes, the sounds, all that. I was planning for it to just kind of be match cutty and for the audience to be able to tell. But once I saw that first rough cut, I was like, man, I just don't think that this is getting sold. Trent and Tyler said the same thing, as well as my wife. They just didn't understand if that was going to be sold to the audience. So really had to make a pivot there from the storyboard, which is fine, sweat it a little bit, but that's okay. Things were fine. And I think, it worked out, but it did take a little bit of brainstorming, figuring out how that was going to look, adding some flashes, some whoosh effects, played with some semitones of some of the whooshes because they were a little too high, not as bassy as I wanted, but you could slow them down, speed them up, and then kind of mess with the panning and some of the audio as well, like coming from the left to the right, just kind of sells it to your audience. And for some of the other audio effects, adding in some atmosphere, I just went into art lists, typed in, like city at night, just to give some sort of ambience, then added, baby noises, because that's what babies do. Like you hear birds chirping at the beginning because our guy is running in the middle of this wooded area-ish farmland, and even the footsteps that our main character is running, those weren't things that I captured while on set. We were in a truck, so I couldn't capture, great audio from there. I had to pick stock audio and slow it down to match his footsteps. One funny note is that Brendan showed up and his running form was not to the liking of Trent in particular. I'm not calling out Trent. I also noticed it, but I wasn't gonna make Brennan change up his running form. But poor Brennan got flamed in front of the whole running group on his running form, like elbows and stuff. It's fine. Brennan, if you're watching this, we love you and you're better for it. I think he ran like under 2 hours for the half marathon, so he's fine. He did a good job. One thing that really helped me in the edit is even something that I had in the storyboard, is having sound come in early from the scene that's going to come next. So there's one scene in particular that I think really sold it, and it was like the bedroom scene with Brennan, who's our main character, in the 4-year-old version, and they're in that bedroom. They do like the cute little, the high five, and then the finger, and then he goes to like her forehead. She just giggles and melts my heart to pieces while I was holding the camera. It was beautiful. And then at that moment, it kind of hangs on her face a little bit longer than I was intending. I was actually wanting some dialogue there between the two of them, and we filmed it. It just didn't make it, of her saying like, I love you, Dad, and him saying the same thing to her. I love you daughter, something that a dad would say. And instead, I kind of wanted to hang on that emotion that we got from her. She was fantastic. So we hung on that and then added in the audio from the older version, daughter, and her saying, hey, Dad, guess what? And that cut to Brennan, reacting to that and saying, what?
Good night.
what?
What?
I made this for you.
I don't know. I think it sold. I think it looked good. There's a few other instances of, putting some audio in the scene before that leads in to the next thing. I think it really sells the transition, in my opinion, especially because, all of this was non-linear and it was kind of in our character's head. So you're afforded some freedom, to kind of do some of those more abstract things. And I hope it sold. I hope it sold it to you. But it sounded good. I was happy with it. So I guess at the end of the day, that's what I need to hang my hat on. So I was happy with it. So yeah, that's pretty much it. That's the in-depth breakdown on the more director side for this film. If there's any questions that you have for the cinematography breakdown that's coming, of what the DP did while on set, which was me, and some of the coloring stuff, maybe some of the lighting stuff, ask those questions in the comments on this video and I'll hopefully answer them in the next one. I know this film, it wasn't perfect. It could absolutely be improved on, but that's not something you learn until you actually do the thing. But considering, all the time constraints that we had, which was like 2 weeks, having realistically no budget, no professional actors or locations, I'm really happy and proud of what we were able to make. I had a blast making this, and I hope you had such a blast, watching this and growing alongside me in this. But really that's what it's all about, being on set with good people, having a good time, and telling a meaningful story that impacts others. I hope to continue to make more content like this and hope to have you alongside with me. Thank you for being here. I love you.